Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, November the 6th, 2021. It is currently 11:26 a.m. Central Time, and I have a news story in front of me that I just got notified about, I don't know how long ago. And as soon as I saw the headline, I'm like, okay, we need to talk about it today. So we're going to work through the article together. We're going to work through some of these findings, and you can obviously let me know your thoughts and your opinion. This is a preliminary, this is me thinking in real time, me reacting in real time to the story because I haven't had any time to work through it, think about it, analyze it. So this is just going to be real-time reaction. You can give me your real-time reaction as well. But let's start with a definition. Let's start with a word, and I'll give you a definition of this word. The word is value. Value. All right. The plural would be values. So I really want to think of the word values, but they're going to give us the definition for value. All right, here we go. Value. The regard that something is held to deserve the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. All right. The regard that something is held to deserve the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So value, when you value something, you are regarding it as being something that is important, something that has worth, something that is useful. Right? When you value something, you're valuing that this is important, that this is something significant, something that is important and has great value, has something as something of great importance. That's the word I was looking for. Something of importance, something of worth, something of usefulness. That's how you value something. What do you value? What are your values? Now, sometimes we say values, we may think of values as saying, I think we would say it in a similar way. So I'll just state it as a question. What things do you value? When it comes to your values, you think this behavior or this thinking or these ideals, you think they're important. What are your values? What do you value the most? I think that's very important. Another definition here is, and this is what I was trying to merge the two together, a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. So you have, and I think the two fit together. You have these principles, you have these standards that you regard as being something of importance, something of worth, something that is useful. So what do you value? What principles do you value? So, because I think sometimes we think of values and we just think of them as, okay, here are principles that I hold to. These are my values that I was raised with. But at the same time, because those are your principles, your beliefs, you value them in the sense of being important, of worth, of useful. You see a value in them. So I want to see the two concepts. Value, what do you value? And what principles do you hold on to that make up your values? And as a Christian, are you sure that what you value and your values is based off Scripture? Or is it based off culture, based off how you were raised, based off pragmatic considerations? Or what we value and our values, are they clearly shaped by the Word of God? Because I think so many times you'll hear Christians say things and they'll act like this is just a part of their values. And I'm like, but I don't know if that's Christian. That may be something else. It may be conservative. It may be liberal, but is it Christian? So what do you value? And what are your values? And of course, your values are principles that you value. I was trying to merge the two concepts together to try to see different kind of shades of meaning here and trying to get a more fuller understanding of this concept. Now, the reason I'm talking about value and values is because we have a report taken away from the Public Religion Research Institute. The Public Religion Research Institute has released its 2021 American Values Survey. The Public Religion Research Institute has released its 2021 American Values Survey that asks thousands of Americans for their views on issues of cultural and religious significance, as well as their opinions at the forefront of American political debate. Now, these are the principles that people hold to. This is their values, but I want you to just see that those values are things that they regard as being significant, of being of great worth. So I want you to see two concepts. Let me try to explain it this way. Some people say, well, how much do you value entertainment? Well, I think entertainment is worthwhile. I think it's significant. I think it's good. All right. How much and we could get into a discussion. Do you put too much value to that? How much value should you place on it? And sometimes we reduce the idea of value to that. But value and values are connected because values are those principles, but you are assigning a value to them of being of great significance and worth. And you may think that other people need to see them the same way. So the two concepts to me work together. So what did they find in their 2021 American Values Survey? Well, we're going to look into this and see. They've got 5 takeaways here, but let me continue with the story. While the survey revealed vast differences and opinions among Americans based on differing political, ethnic, and religious backgrounds, some opinions shown in the study were held by a majority of all groups. The survey was conducted between September the 16th and September the 29th. They have responses from people living in all 50 states. Here are 5 takeaways from the 2021 American Values Survey. What did they find? All right, here we go. Let's go to the next page. Number 1. All right. Now, I don't know if these are listed in order of significance or, I don't know if they are listed in, I just saw another news story that's stopping me. Okay, I'm seeing this other news story. I'm like, wait a minute here. Okay, I think we're going to end up having to talk about that at some point. But right now, I got to stay focused on this one. Yeah, when you're looking at a website and all these other articles are popping up, you're like, wait a minute. But we've got to talk about this one. So I got to stay focused here. All right. So 5 takeaways. All right, from this survey, American Values Survey. Number 1, economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. Economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. Now, I found this interesting because I'm thinking, okay, values, principles, what do people value? And it wasn't what I was thinking when I saw the headline. So this is kind of an interesting, I wasn't expecting this one. Economic anxiety looms large across all demographic groups. Here's what they found. The American Value Atlas found that 65% of Americans agree with a statement asserting that the economic issues facing the country are primarily a result of long-term problems, while 32% of Americans believe that the economic issues facing the country are primarily a result of hardships caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The belief that the United States is facing read this again. The belief that the United States faces long-term economic problems cuts across differences in partisan affiliation and ethnicity. 69% of independents agree with the former statement, along with 68% of Democrats and 60% of Republicans. 58% of Hispanic Americans, 64% of Black Americans, 67% of white Americans, 68% of Americans belonging to other racial groups, and 73% of multiracial Americans believe that long-term problems plague the U.S. economy. Now, so what people value here, I'm just going to reword this a little bit to try to process this, because again, these are what people value. This is their values. And we start off with a belief about that the problems in the economy are long-term problems. In other words, these problems go beyond just the coronavirus, just beyond the pandemic. They go beyond that. So it seems like most of Americans believe there are some long-term problems with the economy. So what does this speak about their values or what they value? Well, it seems to me it would demonstrate that they value and they value economic stability and economic relief from some of the things that they are facing. That one of the things so I'm trying to go with both concepts, value and values. The principle seems to be that the people would like to be in a situation where they were not facing such economic difficulties. It's just interesting that this is part of a value survey. It really is. It would be one thing if they were offering some kind of, I guess they're offering a principle or belief. Their principle and belief that they're holding to, a part of their values, is that the problems in the economy are long-term. And it looks like that this would indicate that they value economic stability and relief maybe more than other issues. Maybe the one thing that is most important to them that they value more than anything is a good economy. Let's think of it that way. Is it possible that what most Americans are, and I don't think this is going to be shocking. But I'm trying to word this in a way that would reflect the idea of value and values. Is it possible that what most Americans value the most, no matter what they may claim that they care most about this or care most about this, when it comes down to it, that they care more about economic issues than they do other social issues, maybe even more, they may care more about economic issues than they do religious issues. That's what they care about the most. Even though they may claim not to, when it comes down to it, it's money, it's economic stability, it's economic standing, it's economic relief. And so as Christians, we have to ask ourselves, have we become too concerned and preoccupied with materialistic things? I'm not saying we can't be. I'm not saying we can just ignore those. Yesterday, I got ready to drive here to the church, and I was like, oh boy, once again, got to put gasoline in the car, right? Because 20-minute drive, 20-minute back. It goes through the gasoline relatively quick. So I went to the convenience store / gas station, pulled up, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Over $3 a gallon. All right, well, then I'm like, okay, that's going to cost this much. Then, it'll be Tuesday. Who knows how fast I'll need more gasoline in the car. That starts adding up to a weekly expense. That starts adding up. That creates hardship. So at that moment, when I'm standing there at the gas pump, you know what I value above all else? I value lower gas prices. That's what I value. At that point, I don't know if I value anything more than that at that moment. Now, I hopefully value and my values and my principles and the things I think are most important. I don't believe it's just that, but there are times where that comes into play. Or if, people going to the grocery store and seeing how much things cost. At that moment, it becomes very important. They go on to say, additionally, 80% of Americans agree with a statement declaring that the cost of housing and everyday expenses are rising faster than their income. That seems to be not just a feeling. There seems to be actual, data to support that. Respondents were asked if they had concerns about their ability to pay for the essential goods used in daily life, their rent, mortgage, credit card bills, student loan payments. 55% of respondents expressed concern about their ability to pay for at least 2 or 4 expenses. Concern about the ability to pay for at least 2 of the 4 most common expenses was shared by a majority of Democrats, independents, and Republicans. While a majority of Americans overall, 54%, now believe that a college education is more of a risky investment that may not pay off as opposed to a smart investment. Perception of the value of a college education differs based on race and party identification. 58% of Democrats believe that a college education is a wise investment. That view drops significantly among independents, down to 42%. Republicans, 37%, Majority of Americans of other races, 58%, Hispanics, 54%, see college education as an intelligent investment, while just 48% of Black Americans and 41% of white Americans say the same. So it seems that that more and more people no longer value a college education. They see that as a risky investment. They don't see the value in it. And maybe now a part of their values, they don't have the principle that, well, college is important. They've downplayed it, or they don't think it's significant, or they think it's just a risky investment, that you could spend all of this money to go to college to get a piece of paper that ultimately doesn't significantly help you financially. In fact, it hurts you financially, because now after you get the paper, you got to pay off all of that debt. And then now it becomes more and more difficult to survive, because now you're trying to make money and you're trying to pay off the school loan debt with all your other bills. And it's actually long-term more problematic. So it is interesting that value is changing. So now we've got to put this in a more theological perspective. As a Christian, when it comes to the economy, it comes to money, it comes to college, it comes to all of these issues, how should you view it from a theological perspective? We know that the love of money creates major problems. We are not to love it, that we talk in the scripture about not serving God. You can't serve God and mammon. You have to serve one or the other. Where your heart is, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. The things you treasure is where your heart will ultimately be, because the thing you treasured identifies the location of your heart. So if you treasure material and economic things, that shows where your heart is, okay? I'm going to look something up here. Yeah, I'm going to pull up the actual scripture here. It's Matthew 6:21. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Whatever you treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. So whatever you treasure, whatever you value, that's where your heart is. Well, you may not say, I value money, but if you are preoccupied with it, concerned about it, does that become a major distraction for your spiritual life? We could state it this way. How does economic concerns impact your spiritual life? I think this is a very reasonable question. How does economic concerns impact your spiritual life? Because so much of your life is connected to making money, going to work to make money so that you can support your family. But how much of that can distract, hurt, hinder spiritual growth, hinder and hurt prayer, evangelism, discipleship? I think it's something to be considered greatly, that do we have a right perspective on money? Now, a lot of times when churches speak, this is how churches a lot of times do this. Everyone here needs to be the right perspective on, this is the way some churches handle it. And I know that it may not be intentional, but it really comes across this way. So maybe they don't state it this way, but it's the way it comes across. All right. Hey, church, I need all of you to have the right mindset about money. And one of the key elements of having the right mindset about money is you have to ensure that you're giving us 10%. Now, I understand that you're maybe trying to put forth a biblical understanding of what maybe you believe the tithe is still in effect, or however you believe about the tithe. I understand you're maybe trying to give people a spiritual perspective, but it seems very self-serving. Hey, get all of your money situations correct so that there's more money coming into the church. It always feels, it feels yuck. It just feels dirty, feels corrupt. At the same time, you still have to preach about helping people have a correct view of money. I just want you to ask yourself, how has economic issues impacted your spiritual life? That's the main question. How has economic concerns become, well, in a sense, your treasure, and that's where your heart is as well? I think that's very important to consider. Another thought is, I'm trying to process, what do we do with the college education? How do we view that? There's been a shift. College is not worth it anymore. How do we here's what I think we must, we have to ingrain in everyone's brain this, though. This is what I will say. I think in some cases, college is a risky investment and may not be worth it. But look, I think we have to try to make sure that we value education. Like, you may not go to college. You can still value education and constantly be learning and constantly be pursuing knowledge and constantly be pursuing understanding. You don't have to necessarily go to college and still can become a very educated and knowledgeable person. I believe as Christians, we need to see that God has given us a brain. We need to be good stewards of that brain, and we need to use and grow in knowledge and understanding so that we can glorify God more and we can be useful. So I just because people may decide college is not financially feasible or even the right smart thing to do, doesn't mean we then stop becoming educated. A lot of people are like, college is a waste of time, but you don't, okay, well, fine. You think college is a waste of time. The last time you picked up a book was simply to move it. All right, you're afraid to read, you're afraid to study, you're afraid to learn, you're afraid to grow in any intellectual pursuits. Okay, that is a problem. And I think that as Christians, we need to be learning and growing so that we can be more, we can bring God more glory because he gave us the ability to think and we should use it. So I just think that was interesting. They put all of those concepts together. All right, so let's go back to this. All right, so people are worried about money, and a lot of people now don't believe college is the key to making more money. They believe it's a risky investment. All right, now let's go to the next page. The next one. All right. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, boy. We may need to dedicate an entire podcast to this one. This one is probably going to be controversial, okay? Sometimes if you hear that distractions, this webpage throws up videos and ads all over the place, and it drives me absolutely crazy. I'm at thechristianpost.com, and every time you move the page, it throws up this video, and I don't know why. I don't care to see the video. I don't want the video. Stop popping the video up. I don't want the pop-up, okay? All right, here we go. Now, this is number 2. This is big. Evangelicals most likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history. Evangelicals most likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history. While a substantial majority of Americans, 64%, agree that God has granted Americans a special role in history, white evangelical Christians are the most likely religious group to believe so. In addition to 75% of white evangelical Christians, majority of black Protestants, 67%, and other Christians, 55%, along with half of Hispanic Catholics, think divine intervention plays a role in America's place in history. All right, now let's stop right here. There's a lot to unpack from that, and I would have to really know exactly what these people think. On one hand, we can all say that divine intervention plays a part in every nation's history because I believe in God's providence and God's sovereignty, and that whatever comes about is because of God's providence and sovereignty. Now, if you're saying it from that way, you're saying, look, well, yeah, obviously America, God was involved. Well, but you have to say that about every nation. You have to say that about China. You have to say about that the rise of the Taliban coming to power. You have to say about Nazi Germany. You have to say that about every regime tyrant that's ever come to power, that God brings those people to power for his purpose and his plan. So that wouldn't make America any more special than any other nation, because every other nation has risen because of God ordaining it as a part of his providence, and he was involved in it. But I think many Christians act like, no. God, there's something special about America, not special about other nations. Like God was specially involved in America, not involved in other nations. So now, what do you mean by specially involved? What do you mean by that? And this is where it starts getting very tricky, because on one hand, many of the people who are like, well, yes, God is sovereign over all nations, they don't really believe in God's sovereignty, and they will talk around it and deny it in so many other areas. So I think for many people, when they say divine intervention was involved, I think they mean in a special way, that somehow America is special. America is unique. America is different. Dare I say, America is better. Now, many of the people who hold to that position will get very irritated with you and very upset with you if you offer criticism about America's past. Slavery, and they'll say, well, it doesn't matter. Other nations, okay, well, it doesn't matter what other nations. You're the one making the claim that America is somehow special and unique. We have to at least bring into our specialty, that if we're special and that we're unique, we cannot ignore slavery. Taking the land from the indigenous people, and I mean, come on, let's not deny what occurred. Taking their land, fighting them, placing them in reservations. I mean, come on, we can talk about denying people civil rights. There was lots of bad things that happened to America. And no one is denying that other nations don't have the same kinds of issues, because the history of the world is a history of fallen, sinful people engaged in fallen and sinful practices. So you have to really articulate what you mean here, right? Do I believe God was involved? Yeah, because God is involved in the rise of all nations because he's sovereign. In a special way? Are you saying that there's some divine destiny for America? Manifest destiny kind of concept? Like, where are you going with that? The Christian groups least likely to believe that God has granted America a special role in history are white mainline Protestants and white Catholics. Among both groups, 46% believe the U.S. has a unique role granted by God, non-Christians, 29%, and religiously unaffiliated Americans, 18%, are even less likely to think the U.S. has a special role in history. Now, we have to stop here. Not completely, but at least to throw out some concepts here. I think this is interesting when you break down the demographics, that we do see this a lot in white evangelical churches, we can say white evangelical conservative churches. They tend to be very patriotic. God bless America. America is great. America is wonderful. America, don't criticize America. America is the greatest nation in the world. America, God has almost a destiny, a manifest destiny for this country, and they are very patriotic. They'll have American flags in the sanctuary. They may, on 4th of July, do patriotic services. There's a lot of that within the conservative evangelical world. I'll give you the example where I found my first conflict with some of this is when I was a teenager. First Baptist Church, Tuscola, Texas, not too far from where I'm sitting. Most of you have heard this story. I walk in, I think it was a Wednesday night. And we walk in, and the pastor stands up and he says, the United States of America just launched some airstrikes. I think it was in Beirut, under Reagan. And everyone in the church stood up and applauded. And I got up and walked out. Now, I probably shouldn't have got up and walked out and try to make a scene, because now I'm making it about me, but I was a teenager at the time. And I was like, I was really new to being a Christian. But I'm like, we're applauding that airstrikes were launched and people died. Yeah, that doesn't sound very Christian to me. And anyway, now I'm not ever saying that war is not necessary. War can be necessary. I believe it must meet the just war criteria. I'm very much a supporter of the just war theory, just war doctrine, going back to Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, and we could go through all the history of it. But just because America launches a military campaign does not make it right. So some Christians have this mindset, well, if America launches the military strike, it's right because it's America. No, and you have to support the troops. Don't give me the garbage about you got to support the troops, because if you want to support the troops, there's some military actions we shouldn't support because you're putting American lives at risk and dying for what? Dying for what? I know I'm getting ready to get myself into some trouble, but I stood against and was against America's invasion into Iraq in 2003. After September the 11th, 2001, we go into Afghanistan. Next thing you know, we're going to Iraq because supposedly they have weapons of mass destruction. And I was like, there are no weapons of mass destruction there. This is ridiculous. We should not be going there. And I was in the military at the time. And I had to be careful what I could say and didn't say. I got myself in some questionable, I won't say severe trouble, but I got myself in some difficult situations because I can remember being in some briefings where we were being briefed because I was going to be sent to a certain location because we were going to set up a decontamination center because they were convinced that, these certain chemicals and biological agents were going to be used. And I remember going, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. I guarantee you there's nothing there. And well, I was right. And I think a lot of other people said that. Well, we went in, invaded a country. How many people died? How many civilians died in Iraq? We destabilized the country. Sectarian violence spread. Insurgents came in. We broke it and so many people died. I don't think that was good or right. Now I don't believe it was a just war. I believe it was not. No way did it meet the criteria. Our intelligence was completely wrong, and there were plenty of us in the military going, come on. After Desert Storm, we controlled the airspace. There's no way that this is happening. And well, the people who questioned it were right, and the people who supported it were wrong. That's the only way to get around it. They were absolutely wrong, and it was an embarrassment, and it was a tragedy. Well, guess what? Some people you can't call anything into question. No, I believe America is a country where has there been good done? Yes. Has there been evil done? Yes, because America is like any other country. It's made up of sinful people. Sometimes we do good. Sometimes we do evil. Has America been great for the spread of Christianity? Absolutely. The freedom of religion has been a great blessing in America, and I thank God for that. It doesn't mean I think sometimes people you have to just be you've got to be patriotic and God bless America, God bless America, God bless America, 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 America. And I'm like, no, I'm not supposed to love a country. I'm supposed to love God. I am thankful for the things that this country has provided, that I have the freedom to go to church, have the freedom to own a Bible, have the freedom to do a Christian podcast and talk about theology. I am grateful for it, but we got to make sure that we don't turn the country into an idol. We got to make sure, remember we just talked about money? Where your treasure is, there is where your heart will be also. Some people's treasure is the America, not God. Now, they'll try to tell you, no, that's not the case, but it sure looks like it. It sure sounds like it. It sure seems like you're more worried about the American flag than you are the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I think that becomes a major problem. All right? Republicans are the most likely political group to believe in a divinely ordained role for the U.S., with 68% of those surveyed holding such a view. Independents, 40%, Democrats, 33%, are significantly less likely to believe that God played a role in shaping America's place in history. Now, this is very important because this becomes a very dividing. This is why you get churches that are so different. That church is pro-America, God bless America, God has an ordained role in America, and it's, we're going to win America back to God, and just all of this just very political language. And that's why some people are I'm not going to go to that church. So they start churches that are very much more liberal and don't hold to that view. And we should not be theologically divided over America. I can understand being theologically divided in how to interpret the scriptures when it comes to baptism. That's a scriptural issue. But there's no way that you read the New Testament and we're like, you know what? You need to worry about your country. You need to be patriotic. You need to love your country. That's not a biblical concept. Now, I got no problem loving the country within reason. I got no problem being grateful and thankful for God for doing something in our country that gives us the freedom to spread the gospel, study the Bible, have Bible studies whenever we want. Sadly, in many cases, Christians are running around like America, and not even taking advantage of the different gifts that we have been given. I think we just got to have a proper balance here. And the patriotism thing almost becomes idolatrous, and it becomes absolutely crazy. And people are more, I hate to say this, their thinking is more pro-American driven than it is theologically or biblically driven. I know I'm going to get myself in trouble with some of this, but that's okay. They go on to say, so, and of course it's Republicans who are most likely, an overwhelming majority, 74% of Americans believe that the U.S. has always been a force for good in the world. Now, is that an accurate? Have we always been a source for good in the world? Were we like when America was America a source for good? The founding of America. I mean, we got to just ask this question. Was the founding of America a source for good for the indigenous people who were here? The different tribes were Cherokee, Apache. I'm just thinking of tribes more present here in this part of the country where I live. I think I said the Cherokee, the Apache, the Comanche. There's the different tribes. I can't say America was good for them. I don't know if America was good for people being brought from, Africa on slave ships to come here and be used as slave labor and be purchased like property. And then even after slaves were freed, they were denied their basic civil rights, couldn't use the same water fountain, use the same entrance, sit in the same place. I don't know. Was it a source for good for that? Now, that's part of the world. Now, you could argue America played a major role in defeating the Nazis. That was a very source of good. So are we looking at this statement from a truthful perspective, or are we looking at it from a pro-American ideological perspective? And some people get very upset when you offer any criticism. I just think that there's some criticisms here that we have to at least ask. So an overwhelming majority, 74% of Americans believe that U.S. has always been a force for good in the world. Support for that view stands at 92% among Republicans, 72% among independents, and 67% among Democrats. A major discrepancy there between or difference between Republicans and Democrats on this subject. A very big difference. Now, again, that's I look at how these ideologies come into the church, right? When they come into the church and they circumvent or they corrupt our theological understanding, or we try to mix some of these views with our theology to create almost a Christian nationalism or this Christian patriotism, that's when I get nervous, because now slow down here. Slow down here. We got to be very careful with some of the statements we make. White evangelical Protestants are the most likely religious group to see the U.S. as a consistent force for good, 88%, followed by white mainline Protestants, 88%, Catholics, 85%, Hispanic Catholics, 73%, other Christians, 71%, Black Protestants, 69%, and non-Christians, 66%. Although religiously unaffiliated, Americans are the least likely, religiously unaffiliated Americans are the least likely group to view the U.S. as a consistent force of good. A majority, 58%, still saw America's influence in the world as consistently positive. So it's weird. If you're religious, you tend to see America one way. If you're not religious, you see America a different way. That is fascinating to me, because if I study my Bible, like if I just read from Genesis to Revelation, do I derive a different view about America from reading Genesis to Revelation? In other words, it seems like the way the statistics would almost indicate, if I study my Bible, I'm pro-American. If I don't study my Bible, I'm not pro-American. What is it in the study of the Bible that would lead to such a pro-American view that America is a consistent force of good in the world? America's great. America's wonderful. Let's go America, 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 America. What would it be in the scriptures that would even lead us to that conclusion? America's not even mentioned, obviously. Israel's the country that other countries are mentioned as being enemies to Israel. Israel's conflict with other countries. Where would we see America there? I've studied the Bible, and I don't know if I've ever become pro-American and go out and buy an American flag, put it in my front yard, or want to run here and bring an American flag into the sanctuary of the church because I studied my Bible. Now, I think that by studying the Bible, I can look at different things America has done, and I can say good or I can say bad, because study of the Bible is obviously a study of morality. So I'd have some morality framework to look at it and go. So I guess I want to go further into this, but we'll stop right here and we'll come back and we'll talk about these more, because I think there's a lot of issues. So we got two issues really, or three issues. We have three issues here. Money or economic, we'll say the economy, college, and patriotism. So let me ask you, how has the subject of money and the economy impacted your spiritual life and your spiritual thinking for the good or for the worse? How has the subject of college either being worth it, not worth it, how has that impacted you? Now, if you're like, well, I just don't think college is worth it, has that impacted your view on education, which could profoundly impact your spiritual growth, because spiritual growth is so much about learning. So does that have any impact at all? And number three, how has patriotism hindered your spiritual life? I don't think it can help it in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just not even going to offer that as an alternative. I don't think patriotism has any positive impact on anyone's spiritual life because it corrupts it. So how has the economy impacted your spiritual life? How has your view in college changed, and how has it impacted your spiritual life? And number three, how has patriotism impacted your spiritual life, your church? I've given a clear example in my church where I'm like, what are we doing? We're standing up and applauding because we just launched missiles into another country. I'm not so good for that. I'm not so good for that. I know a lot of churches were very supportive of the United States military going into Iraq in 2003 and leading up to 2003. And I was just baffled by it. I'm like, why is the church supporting this? It's a horrible decision. There are no weapons of mass destruction. I just want to scream it every day because it's just so many people died for what? And then you can really look at how many years were we in Afghanistan? Taliban's now in charge. How did that all work out? How much blood was shed there? Now, I'm not saying there wasn't a reason to go into Afghanistan since it was the training ground for terrorists. I understand that. You could argue, well, wait a minute, Saudi Arabia, wasn't the attackers from Saudi Arabia? Yeah, we could go to 9/11, Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of issues we could bring up, but you sometimes have to ask, and then sometimes you have to ask, were our motivations good or were our motivations economic? In other words, were we more worried about oil and there's lots of very important questions that have to be asked. But a lot of churches just supported something. And I'm like, I don't know how supportive we should be. Look, here's the way I've always thought. If war is necessary, then yes, we say, I understand it's necessary, but it's almost like some Americans, some Christians treat war like they treat a football game. Yeah, our team, blow them up. Let's kill some people. And it's like, hey, those are human beings creating the image of God. Anytime death occurs is not a thing to celebrate. It may be a necessary thing that must occur to stop the spread of evil, going back to just war doctrine. It may be a necessary thing, but it's not something that I necessarily want to celebrate and get all happy about, like my team just scored a touchdown. It's a horrible tragedy because people died. And I think sometimes men, it's usually men within the Christian world, they talk about, there'll be something going on in the Middle East. I've told the illustration before, and I've heard Christian men say it so many times. Well, you know what we need to do? We just need to turn that place into a parking lot. So you're saying bomb it out of existence. Yeah, that sounds right there in the Bible. That's not Christian. so many of our values, and that demonstrates what we value. We value American military victory over human life. Now, I'm not saying that there's never a time that has to occur, because there's times I believe it's just to occur. We could talk of World War II. We could argue there was a just war reason for that. You could talk about other of our conflicts, and you're like, wait a minute, what were we doing? Why? And it's very murky and questionable. But just because it has to happen doesn't mean that we talk about it like, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, you realize you were talking human beings dying. That's the one thing Christians should not ever want or celebrate, human beings dying. So what do we really value? What is our value? What does that say about our values? So that I wanted to get into more of this, but that brings up money, brings up education, and it brings up patriotism. And if you look at the American church, money always becomes an issue some way, somehow. The economy always does. College, that's kind of an interesting change. Don't really know what to do with that. But patriotism has been dividing the American church for years. And at some point, the church has to wake up and go, what do we actually value the most? What are our values? Using it in both ways. All right, I'll stop right there. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I know this wasn't perfect. I'm just, it's not like I have a co-host here that we can bounce ideas back and forth. So I'm just systematically working through it, talking about it out loud. I told you exactly what I was going to do from the beginning, but these are the kinds of studies that I think we have to look at and what's going on in the church. What do we value? What are our values, and how have these things impacted our spiritual lives? I think it's very important to consider. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great Saturday. Email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a great day. God bless.